We have the head of Australia's Operations Southern Borders, Major General Andrew Bottrell. Welcome, sir.
Thanks very much, Hazari.
How is it opposed to the Australian summer and Sri Lankan weather has been?
Well, look, this is about the fifth time that I've come to Colombo, and I have to say I think it's a little cooler than last time I was here. So I always get welcomed back with open arms. So I'm always very pleased to come back.
On a serious note, talk about it is in 2013 that the party promised of sovereign borders. What prompted exactly for the Australian government to have a separate immigration control unit?
Look, I think because the government that came in at the time in 2013 decided that in late 2013 campaigned very heavily on regaining control of our borders and tackling what was a scourge of people smuggling. They looked at the issue very carefully and decided that the best way to coordinate the whole of government activities was to set up a joint agency task force so that it could, through the head of that agency, coordinate all of those activities to make sure that we could have the best solution, because there is not one thing that would tackle people smuggling. It required an approach from multiple angles, and over 16 departments and agencies in Australia contribute to the outcomes under this policy.
So you said it's a collective process. And this unit was established when Tony Abbott was the Prime Minister, and now Malcolm Turnbull, and you were appointed during Tony Abbott's time. So how different is it in terms of policy-wise for the unit?
Hazari, that's a good question. I have to say there has been not a beat missed from when Mr Abbott was the Prime Minister compared to when Mr Turnbull took over. The policy has not changed at all, and if anything has happened, we have further reinforced our maritime border. We've got more aircraft and we've got more ships out there to make sure that people smugglers can't get their boats through. And the reason why we've done that is ultimately to stop people dying at the hands of people smugglers, because the Australian public would not stand for that any longer.
So you mentioned it's a life-saving effort, but if we do see the boat arrivals have reduced, would you like to comment on the number of boats coming into the Australian border territory?
Yes, certainly. Look, over time those boats have obviously reduced, but under Operation Sovereign Borders, when it was established in September 2013, we've had through that period, when we commenced the turnbacks in December 2013, we've returned 29 boats with 840 people. So those boats haven't stopped totally. They still continue to come, and they continue to see whether they can get through our border security arrangements. And every one of them has failed. The last one that successfully arrived was in mid-2014, July 2014. There has not been a successful arrival now in over 850 days. And I'm very confident that we will keep it that way, because we have reinforced our law enforcement and our intelligence cooperation with countries like Sri Lanka and with other countries, and we've deployed more ships and more aircraft to detect those boats that do get away. And then we still have our regional processing arrangements with Papua New Guinea and with the island nation of Nauru, so that if anyone does manage to get through, they still will not settle in Australia. The government has been crystal clear that settlement in Australia will never be an option for anyone who tries to come illegally to Australia without a visa.
Interesting point you made in terms of offshore camps, which has been criticized by especially humanitarian agencies. How would you reassure, as the Operation Sovereign Border, that it is a humanitarian task in terms of protecting lives, especially migrants coming from South Asian region?
Hazari, that is it's a tough question, but it's a good question, because when I look at this policy, and since I took over in March last year, not a single person has been transferred to regional processing, because we have not allowed a boat to come through for us to then have to transfer anyone to those regional processing centres. But we maintain those processing centres as a backup, as part of that broader system. The people who are in there now had all arrived prior to us commencing turnback. So the majority had arrived during that period, 2008 to 2013, and had been were then transferred either to the regional processing centres, or some of them are still being processed in Australia that arrived earlier. So to get back to your question, I look at the issue in its totality. We know that 1,203 souls were lost by trying to get to Australia by boat. What we've done by being able to stop those boats and turn them around is it's reduced the demand from people. So people smugglers can no longer sell what they were trying to sell. They can no longer deliver settlement in Australia. They can't even deliver access to Australia because we are intercepting and returning those boats. So people smugglers are lying to people to try to convince them to get on the boats. We are saving lives by stopping their ability to do that. In terms of the regional processing centres, we have worked with the nations of Nauru and Papua New Guinea to make sure that those people their claims for protection are processed. And Australia has worked, as we agreed at the beginning, to try to assist those countries to find third country settlement solutions. And as Prime Minister Turnbull announced on the 13th of November, we've established an arrangement with the United States to settle, for the United States to agree to settle a large number of those people who were determined to be refugees in the United States. But the important point is that that settlement deal is not available to anyone who arrived illegally in Australia after the 13th of November. It was only available as a one-off deal to those people who were already in the regional processing centres.
Another sensitive issue would be the children who are among the people smugglers. So this is where the criticism comes even severe, especially when it comes to offshore camps. So what sort of a different role will the Operation Sovereign Border will play after the 13th November announcement about not allowing anyone who comes to Australian borders through boats?
Look, firstly, I think this government would be very vocal and would make the point that they have done a lot to ensure that there is no longer any child in detention in Australia. So they've been very successful at getting them out of detention and to put them into the community where their claims for protection are still being processed. But there are no longer any children in detention in Australia, or even in the regional processing centre at Nauru. That is now an open centre, so they have an ability to live in the community in Nauru, and no one is in detention, or no children are in detention. And the government has made it very clear that they don't want to get back into the position where children are ever put in detention again, which again is one of the reasons why we need to continue to maintain a robust and secure border protection arrangement so that people smugglers can no longer send people to Australia illegally. And the more I learn of this illicit trade, the more I hear about the lies that people smugglers spin to vulnerable people to try to convince them that Australia's policy has changed. It has, as I said before, it has absolutely not changed. It applies to everyone, men, women, children, unaccompanied children. It applies to everyone. So, and it may sound cruel, but it is done for a reason, because by taking away what people smugglers are trying to sell, takes the demand away from people to risk their lives by getting onto a boat in the first place.
I would not like to take credit away from the Operation Sovereign Border, but having said that, collaboration is very important. Working with other countries, especially Indonesia, which for a period of time relations were strained. So how do you work with other countries along with Sri Lanka? And I would add to that point, have you gone into training other forces to curb this people smuggling issue?
Hazari, we have a very wide-ranging and comprehensive international engagement program as part of this policy. As I've said before, that our relationship with Sri Lanka was already very, very robust. It's been a long and enduring relationship. We have a very large and healthy Sri Lankan diaspora in Australia. We engaged very early as part of the implementation of this policy to try to undermine the people smugglers who were particularly active in Sri Lanka, and the authorities were very cooperative in putting that, helping us to put that solution in place. So a lot of our relationship recently has been off the back of the issue of people smuggling, and we've had a lot of success there. But as that issue comes under control more and more, it allows that relationship to broaden into other areas, into other law enforcement areas, into counter narcotics activity, or to countering violent extremism or counter terrorism. So there's a lot of, and in fact, some of the discussions today were about border management. How can Sri Lanka learn from our lessons? How can we learn from Sri Lanka? How can we share information to make sure that we have a more cooperative relationship going forward? Coming to Indonesia, there is a bit of a myth there. Our relationship with Indonesia is very strong. And even with the issue of people smuggling, even though the media have talked up the issues that we have in that space, there is an awful lot of cooperation with our law enforcement agencies, which has seen Indonesia take a very active and very successful stance in undermining people smugglers before they can even get boats onto the water. So I'm actually very pleased with where that relationship is. Yes, it's true to say that we had some difficult times that we've worked through, but our success in undermining people smugglers has also benefited Indonesia as well, because fewer people are using Indonesia as a transit hub for people smuggling. So there is some benefit to them. We acknowledge the very good work they've been doing recently in that area as well. But I would have to say that the gold standard, our exemplar, our strongest relationship in countering people smugglers has been with Sri Lanka by far.
Then my final question would be just brief on today's visit. And plus, how different is it to work with the new government and the previous government? I know you had good relationship initially when it started in September 2013. So how different is it after the appointment of the new government?
Well, again, I first visited with Minister Dutton in March or April of last year, and I have to say we were welcomed with open arms by the new bureaucracy. As far as it's been described to me, we haven't missed a beat in terms of that relationship. It has continued to be very strong, and I think it only continues to get stronger as we go. So I look to the future with a lot of confidence. In relation to, sorry, the other part of your question was
Today's visit.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. My apologies. Today's visit. So I've accompanied the Commission of the Australian Border Force to both India and to Sri Lanka, which are two very important countries in people smuggling. He, of course, has had a much broader program visiting a number of other countries. I've decided to join him for these two parts. One, to build on relations in India, but for Sri Lanka is really about acknowledging the relations that we already have and continuing to build on what is already a very strong relationship. So it's been very productive in both areas. India was very open and very cooperative, and today again with Sri Lanka has reinforced that our arrangements and our cooperation remains very high.
Mr. General, this window is for you to give a message for the illegal or people who are looking at means of not going in illegal means, because I know a lot of people are leaving Sri Lanka to Australia to migrate and to study, especially to Australia, but I'm talking about the people who are not willing to take that route.
Hazari, my message to them is very clear. The settlement deal that was announced on the 13th of November is not available to anyone who arrives after that date. It is a one-off deal that was only available to those who are in Manus Island and Nauru. Anyone who tries to engage a people smuggler now will not make it to Australia. We have more planes and more boats to make sure that you will be intercepted and turned back. And the final point is that there is a legal means to be able to get to Australia. And if anyone wants to know what they are, then they should get in touch with the High Commission here in Colombo, the Australian High Commission. There is a very large skilled migration program. There is also a large family reunion program that they could access, and there are also a number of other visas that they can access to be able to visit Australia as well. So many legal means, and people should realise if they try to come to Australia illegally, it will undermine their ability to ever apply to come to Australia legally. So they should come the legal route, not the illegal means, and they should certainly not risk their lives by engaging people smugglers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.